For 17 years, I taught sociology at Ferris State University, a mid-sized, predominantly white institution in Big Rapids, Michigan. I am an African American who prides himself on his knowledge of so-called Black history. However, I knew little about the history of African Americans at Ferris. I had heard stories about racial fights in the 1960s and student protests in the 1980s, and I had a vague knowledge of Gideon Smith, reputed to have been the first African American student at Ferris, but my knowledge was incomplete, and in some cases, wrong. The art that a community produces and displays gives essential clues about that community's attitudes, tastes, and values. And equally important, the art tells us what the university believes is important in its past and present. The time seemed right to add to the university's public art. I planned to start by commissioning a painting of Gideon Smith. I asked Franklin Hughes, a multimedia specialist and researcher in the Diversity and Inclusion Office, to find photographs of Smith. The plan was to give the pictures to Diane Clellan, a local artist and a docent in the Jim Crow Museum, so she could use them to paint a portrait of Smith. Hughes's research took him to a time before Ferris was a university, before it was a college, back to its early years as an institute. Franklin's research began a journey first for him, then for the two of us, and later for an entire university. We discovered African Americans who attended Ferris before Gideon Smith, including Nate Harris, the famed Negro League baseball player, and Chester E. Bush, the Mosaic Templars leader who co-founded the NAACP in Little Rock, Arkansas. But there was a bigger story, a much bigger story. Between 1910 and the mid-1920s, more than 60 Black male students from Hampton, Virginia, bravely traveled north to enroll in Ferris Institute. In the early 1900s, Hampton students who wanted college preparatory courses or college courses had to go to other institutions, and Jim Crow laws and customs necessitated they leave the South. The Hampton students who came to Ferris did so decades before they were allowed to attend white colleges in Virginia. They came to enroll in college programs and college preparatory courses, and to escape, if only temporarily, the daily and ubiquitous indignities suffered under the Jim Crow racial hierarchy. They excelled in their studies and became accomplished in their professional fields. Many went on to both ignite and help lead the explosive civil rights movement. Very few people know their stories until now. Haste to Rise is the book that we wrote about the incredible resiliency and breathtaking accomplishments of those students. We introduce readers to dozens of these Jim Crow era students, including the first African American to win a case before the United States Supreme Court, Belford v. Lawson, the lead attorney in New Negro Alliance versus Sanitary Grocery Company, 1938, a landmark court battle that safeguarded the right to picket. We also introduced one of Lawson's contemporaries, Percival L. Prattis, a pioneering journalist and influential newspaper executive. In 1947, he became the first African American news correspondent admitted to the U.S. House and Senate press galleries. The young men who came from Hampton to Ferris in the early 1900s were aware of the state of race relations. Their lives spanned the Jim Crow era. They did not have the luxury of being unaware. They drank from the colored water fountains, watched movies in colored movie theaters, played on colored beaches. They read newspaper editorials claiming that educated Black men were likely to engage in criminal behavior. They knew butlers and house cleaners who in a different nation at a different time would have practiced medicine or earned livings from behind university lecterns. They came to Ferris Institute hoping for the opportunities denied to them in many parts of the country. They excelled in their studies. These were smart men. They became almost to a person accomplished in their professional fields. Moreover, they grew into civil rights leaders, working to end the Jim Crow hierarchy and other expressions of racial injustice. Haste to Rise is also an opportunity to focus on the life and work of our founder, Woodbridge Nathan Ferris, who long before it was normative, created opportunities for women, international students, and African Americans. Woodbridge Ferris said, "My plea in Michigan, and it will be my plea to the last breath I draw, and the last word I speak, is education for all children, all men, and all women of Michigan, all the people in all the states, all the time." The more we researched his life, meaning his words and actions, the more we realized that he really did mean all the people. And he meant it at a time when Black people were routinely mistreated in this country. Carter G. Woodson, the great historian, wrote, "The truth must be dug up from the past and presented to the circle of scholars in scientific form, and then through stories and dramatization that will permeate our educational system. Haste to Rise is our attempt to dig up and present the past."